Hey booktube, my name is the Book Mage and welcome back to another haul. Do you remember this girl? I kind of do post way too many book hauls. I know I haul too many books to start with. I need to stop buying so many books. Yeah, we don't know her. So yeah, if you know anything about me, you'll know that I buy way too many books and that my book hauls tend to be on the larger side. That and they're almost always all fantasy. I will also say, not every book in this haul is fantasy. I know, who am I? But yeah, there is still plenty of fantasy in this haul, so I think what I'll do is every time I give you something that's not fantasy, I'll try and like bookend it with things that are actually fantasy. You know, I'll ease you into it, give you a little bit at a time. That way you won't think that I've gone crazy and just betrayed my favourite genre. So I think I have 38-ish books, question mark? Which shockingly is not my biggest haul to date, but this is a big one. So I guess without any further ado, I am just going to get on with it because we do not have enough time to babble in the intro. So the first book I'm going to haul today is The Shadow Saint by Gareth Hanrahan. And this one is the beautiful Goldsborough Special Hardback Edition with like these lovely sprayed edges. And this is book 2 in the Black Iron Legacy, the sequel to the Gutter Prayer, which I have right here. So I'm not going to spoil the plot of this one because it's a sequel, but essentially this is a book that follows 3 thieves in a city on the brink of a god's war. It's a very weird, dark, grimdark kind of city. There are alchemists, there are men made of candle wax, and also out of worms. It's a weird world, but it's deliciously dark and kind of gruesome and confusing at times, but I really love this story. It focuses a lot on like theology and like gods and religion, and so if that is something that you like in fantasy, then maybe pick up this. I really enjoyed this one, and so I am very excited to get onto the sequel at some point this year. This one is also a new release. I believe it came out right at the start of January, although I am really cheeky because somehow I managed to get sent this at the end of December. So I've had this for a while, but I'm pretty sure it's now officially out if you wanted to check it out. So moving on, book 2 in my haul is The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. And while we're here, I also picked up The Dragon Republic, which is book 2. Oh my god, finally I don't look so white compared to something. So this is an Asian-inspired fantasy series, and I've heard it is very grimdark. I've heard there are lots of like content warnings and trigger warnings for this series. I don't know exactly what they are, but you know, keep that in mind. I really don't know very much about the plot of this one. I believe it follows a young girl, and I think she ends up being taken to a school to be trained as a warrior, or something like that. I could be completely wrong, but I think that's what I recall. And I think this is planned to be a trilogy. I think the third book is coming soon, and not that I'm going to get to read it anytime soon because book 2 is pretty chunky. Oh, I didn't even notice book 2 is actually signed, so that's a nice surprise. Honestly, the main reason that I picked these up now, I had known that I wanted to get to them at some point, but let me tell you, I had a dream, and in the dream I was buying and like looking for like the hardback editions, and in the dream I found like the hardback editions just in like a supermarket, and so I bought them in the dream, and then when I woke up from the dream I realised I didn't have them. And so even though prior to having the dream I didn't really care, after having the dream I was like, I need to get them back, even though I never had them in the first place. Honestly, I think R.F. Kuang just has like some sort of like next level marketing campaign where they just beam the ad directly into your brain as you sleep, because honestly, it worked on me. Just to spoil it now, I do not know how I'm going to fit all the books on these shelves, so I'll just try and cross that bridge when I get to it. The next book I have in my haul is very heavy and special and completely different to anything else I'm hauling today. And that is this, that comes in this pretty cute box. That is this stunning edition of Tokyo by Liam Wong. I realise this isn't like a fiction book or even really a book with words for the most part, but I have been following Liam's work for quite a long time. I follow him on Instagram. His artwork and photography is just, it's so fantastic, and I feel like seeing the streets of Tokyo brought to life in like a neon cyber like sort of really colourful, beautiful, like glowy kind of style. I love his photography. So this is just like a coffee table style book, and it's just full of some of his art, his photography, and it does have like this beautiful holographic quote on the back. And this is like such a vibe, such an aesthetic that I'm like so into. I really like photography, I really like cityscapes, and I decided to back this as like a would you call it? Just like a backer, I guess. It wasn't a Kickstarter, it was done through somebody else, but it's that kind of concept. Because I just really wanted to support an artist whose work I've loved for so long and get my hands on this, and I guess when I have my own place I will have this like on like a nice coffee table for guests to very carefully read through. I'm not going to try and prop that one up because it's a little too big for my shelves and it's pretty heavy, so you can just pretend it's there, but I just kind of wanted to share that as part of my haul because like it is a book at the end of the day. The next book in my haul is the Ravenclaw edition of Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, and it's shiny. So yeah, this is the Ravenclaw edition, and you might know that I've been doing a reread of all the books in this series. I have so far only read The Philosopher's Stone. Why is the light doing this to me? This is why the sun is my enemy. But I do intend to read my way all the way through the whole series. So I've been hauling these new editions, I guess, because they look really nice on my shelf. I honestly just really needed to get myself some new, not damaged editions. And along with that, I also decided to get myself the complete Hogwarts library. So this includes Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, Quidditch Through the Ages, and The Tales of Beedle the Bard. And I think these are like the newer American edition ones. I really don't like the British covers that we have. They're too like cartoony. I like that these look like they could be like actual, like, I guess school books. I quite like that vibe. So I have read some of these before, and I figured seeing as I'm rereading the whole Harry Potter series, I might as well read some of like the fun like background lore kind of stuff as well. Not that I really need it, but these will also be very handy for getting my Goodreads goal above my target this year, so some nice short books, always nice to have. And from Harry Potter to something definitely not for children. My next book is The Barrow by Mark Smiley. So this is a pretty chunky paperback and it's a little bit beat up. This is, I believe, secondhand, but it happened to come signed, so I'll take it. I don't know a whole lot about the plot of this book, but if you recognise this, it's probably from the same place that I found out about it, and that is because a wonderful booktuber by the name of Holly Hearts Books actually read and reviewed this book, and that is because this is a dirty book. It is a fairly adult, erotic fantasy, but it's not specifically a romance. Like, there is a lot of plot in there as well. I'm kind of thinking like maybe a little along the lines of Sarah J Maas, but better written with better plot and probably much more explicit sex scenes. I've heard there's something to do with a unicorn horn in here. I feel like I can guess. So I have heard it does have a fairly solid plot. I think it's to do with some adventurers or mercenaries going out to find like a legendary map or something, and it leads to all sorts of complications. I think it's cursed? I could be remembering that wrong, but I think it's like a cursed map. And so yeah, ever since I watched Holly's vlog, her review of her reading this book, I've just been intrigued, and so I thought I would eventually pick it up for myself, and at some point I'll get around to reading it. It feels wrong to put that next to Harry Potter. The next book in my haul is Witch Sign by Den Patrick. And I figured while I was there I would also get Stormtide as well, which is book 2. I'm not sure what it's called, but I think also the third book is releasing maybe this year. I think I've seen like a cover reveal for it, so could be soon. So as you can probably tell, I was initially drawn to these because of the covers. I mean, look, they're just, especially this one, they're just gorgeous. You know my rule, if it has some sort of Corbin on the front, I will buy it. So I'm pretty sure that this is set in a fantastical world where magic is outlawed, which is like, it's just one of my favourite tropes, okay? It's one of my favourite setups for fantasy, is just outlawed magic. I'm really here for like my underdog mages. And I think people who can do magic are born marked with a sign, and I think it's called the witch sign. And so I think there are like witch hunters, like mage hunters, who I guess enforce the rule about not allowing magic people to be or something along those lines. You can tell that I don't really read much into the synopsis of books like after I've bought them, but this kind of struck me as a series that I think I might really like. I'm not 100% sure like how adult these are. I think it's YA. I did see somebody list this as a middle grade at one point, which is the only reason that worries me, but I'm pretty sure it's a YA. And again, book 2 is signed. This one I did know it was signed, it just happened to be on sale at a particular shop, and the signed edition was the cheapest one, so. And actually in that same order I also purchased this, and this is Penrick's Progress by Lois McMaster Bujold. This is set in the World of the Five Gods series, and I believe this is a bind-up of several smaller short stories and novellas. This is chronologically like later in the series, but I think it's technically like a prequel to some of the events in the earlier books. So I've only read the first book in the World of the Five Gods series, but it was one of my favourite books of last year and one of my favourite books of all time. That was The Curse of Chalion. I do have book 2 sitting up on my shelf, but I have not read it yet. But the author came out with this like bind up edition of several stories that I think may have only been available online or in like random print. I'm not entirely sure. But anyway, they released this beautiful hardback edition with this new artwork, which I quite like. And it is technically signed, even though it's on like a sticker that's just like stuck to the page, which isn't quite the same as being signed, I think. So I figure that by the time I get round to reading this, that I will have like this nice edition to turn to with all of these short stories in it, rather than having to like source them later. So next I have a couple books that I picked up from Owl Crate. The first one being The Bone Houses by Emily Lloyd Jones. And this is the Owl Crate unique cover. I wasn't entirely sure whether I liked the white one more than the black one, which is like the default cover. I tend to lean towards black, but I think at the time that I bought this was like discounted, so it was cheaper to get the special edition. And I also feel like, especially on my shelves, white spined books are rarer, so it's like a shiny Pokemon for me. So I believe this is a YA fantasy book that follows a girl who is, I think, a gravedigger. The dead are referred to in this world as like bone houses. Don't know why. I'm sure when I read it, it will all become apparent. And I think that occasionally the dead do rise from the grave as these bone houses, but I think at the point the story starts, they're starting to do it more and more, and I think the question is, why are so many dead coming back to life? And I think obviously because the main character is a gravedigger who deals with these bone houses, they, yes, get caught up in the plot of what's happening and how do we stop it. What a great synopsis of a book that I don't remember the synopsis for. So I mainly picked this one up because I'd heard a few good things about it, and I had this on like my wish list for a while. I was just sort of like thinking about it, looking at it, and when it went on sale I just figured, you know, now's as good a time as any. It's pretty short. I feel like this is a read in a day kind of book, which again is going to be real good for my Goodreads. So I just figured that I would pick it up before it eventually sold out. And the other book that I picked up from Owl Crate was The Guinevere Deception by Kirsten White. And again, I feel like I'm twinning with this book. Like, all my colours match with this book. I love it. Initially I was kind of drawn to this one specifically by the cover. I'd seen the original cover and I really like it. It's like a gold and blue as opposed to like a silver and green. And I feel like this is the better colour scheme. However, I like silver more than gold and I like this kind of like beautiful teal colour more than like the royal blue, as you can probably tell. So this one definitely suits my aesthetic more. I like the sort of more creepy vibes that it gives, I guess. So this is obviously going to be a YA retelling of at least a part of King Arthur and his knights and Guinevere. From what I remember from the synopsis, Guinevere is going to marry Arthur, a complete stranger. I think she is in place to be like his bodyguard or something. I think who she really is a secret because she's a changeling. So she's like assuming the role of Guinevere so that she can be close to the king and I guess protect him. I think that's the plot. As I say, I tend to like to go into a lot of my books a little bit blind. So yeah, this was mainly a cover buy. Again, I don't think it will take a lot to read this. It's fairly short. I've heard mixed things about this. I'm not expecting anything groundbreaking. I'm just expecting some, you know, Arthurian themed entertainment, and if that's what I get, then hopefully I'll be happy. But you never know, it might surprise me. The next book that I picked up was The Spider by Leo Carew. So this is the sequel to The Wolf, which I have not yet read, but I have heard so many good things about. I kind of wanted to jump the gun a bit and get this in hardback while it's still out and not ridiculously expensive, because I feel like I have it on good authority that I am going to enjoy this series. So this one is signed. So I don't know a whole lot about this series, but I think it is based on, I think it's very heavily like Britain inspired. I think there is a place that sort of physically mirrors the British Isles quite a lot, and I think the people in the south are mainly human, but the people from the north are almost immortal. They live for a very long time, and I think it follows a war between the north and the south. That is completely the extent of my knowledge on this series, but I just wanted to take a bet and assume that I was going to like this, and so I would prefer to have like the nice hardback editions, even if it's called The Spider and I have pretty severe arachnophobia. Next, it's time for some more non-fantasy. I know, we're shocked. So I picked up If We Were Villains by ML Rio, and again, this one, honestly, totally a cover buy. I feel like I love this cover just so much. And it also, I don't know if you can tell, this has deckled edges, and also like the end papers are just really pretty. So this is just a really nice edition of a book. I have heard pretty much only good things about this. It's not a genre that I typically tend to read, but I think the basic plot is that we follow a character in like the present day who was arrested for the murder of one of their classmates, and I think they are recounting the story of like what really happened. I think if I recall they're like a bunch of like theatre kids or something like that. So I am looking forward to reading this. I think it's definitely got a vibe that I can really appreciate. I'm pretty sure it's dark academia. My only thing is like the one kind of story, like the one thing that I just can't really read is pretty much anything that that's academia related. Anything to do with higher education just sets my anxiety like straight up to a 10. So this is gonna be a struggle, or something that I have to get to at a certain like sweet spot, you know. It's not a book that I can just pick up and read, but I did want to get it and hang on to it because I think I do really want to read this. Like I would really like to be able to read this. The environment just stresses my brain out so much that like anything academia based I just can't deal with. On the off chance that I ever manage to feel different about that, I wanted to pick this up. Okay, so padding the shock of non-fantasy with some more fantasy, I picked up the Broken Earth trilogy by N.K. Jemisin. So that includes the 5th season, The Obelisk Gate, and The Stone Sky. So these are 3 books that I really want to get to. I have heard like nothing but good things about the 5th season. I have never heard anyone say anything bad about this book, and I feel like that is really rare. So I'm trying not to get my hopes up too much, but I have heard that this is a very good book, and so many people have raved about it and recommended it that I just, you know, I had to get it. At some point, I had to get it. I do also think these covers are beautiful, like this, the second one especially. Like I love the pink. I mean, you wouldn't think so. You think I'd like the one that I twinned with, but I like the pink. Still, I'm so salty that it's impossible to get a copy of this book that doesn't have this weird, gross, ugly sticker on it. Like, I already know the book is great. That's why I bought it. Like, just let me have the nice cover. But yes, I found these like as a boxed set for pretty cheap, so I figured I might as well get them. I know that I really want to get to these at some point, so I figure having them on hand just for like any given moment is probably the way to go. Okay, I feel like I can balance that there, like temporarily. Okay, more non-fantasy, and I know, just don't worry, don't panic. I promise I'm still me. So I picked up The Luminous Dead by Caitlin Starling, and again, this is not typically a book that I would normally read, even though, once again, we are twinning. Any blue book, just any blue book. But I heard a little bit about this, and it's one of those things where if this were a Wikipedia article, I would just read it for hours until I knew what had happened, and I just have that curiosity in my brain to know what happens in this story, so I bought it. Like, I feel like that's a good selling point for a book, is that I was so intrigued by the premise that I wanted to know what happened. That's how normal people buy books, right? So I believe this follows a woman who is going on like a cave dive, like an expedition. So she's been hired on like this very quite like she's getting paid a lot to go solo into this cave, and what she expects this cave dive to be like is not how things actually are. There isn't a whole crew to escort her. There isn't like a load of like, I guess, like various bases and things. It's just one operator in her earpiece talking to her, and I think the synopsis mentions that she feels like she's being followed, so maybe she's not alone in the caves. It just sounds weird and creepy, and cave diving is not something I would like to do. It sounds like a very claustrophobic and stressful atmosphere, and so I don't know, something about this book seems a little bit thrilling to me. I feel like it's a very short, like quite easy read, and I'm just really curious to know the mystery behind what's going on. I've heard pretty good reviews for this book. And again, this book came to me in a dream. I'd already bought it, but I essentially had a dream that was like, it was like 50% the plot of this, about cave diving, and I think the other part of the plot must have been from like Stalking Jack the Ripper, which is a book I have not read. I won't say what exactly happened in the dream. It involved a lot of caves and a lot of murder and a lot of like crime scene investigations, but it was a pretty harrowing dream. And so like if this book is anything like how awful my dream was, I feel like I'm gonna be really entertained. Okay, so don't worry, we're going back to fantasy again, and a complete series this time. So I picked up the entire Empires of Dust series by Anna Smith Spark. So that includes The Court of Broken Knives, The Tower of Living and Dying, and House of Sacrifice. So I do actually own this book already in paperback, but honestly the hardcover editions are just so gorgeous, so like I figured I just had to binge and get the whole series. And once again, my copy of the first book is signed on like a little tip-in plate. So I don't know a whole lot about this series. I remember when I hauled the paperback edition of this, I think I remembered more at that point, and I remembered thinking that it sounded very, very good, like the kind of thing that I would really be into. I've now completely forgotten the entire like plot synopsis, but I still know that it's something that at the time I knew would be really up my alley. So I'm trusting in my past self and I'm just not reading the synopsis. But the back of the book does say, shadows, sorrow, death, something's coming. We need to be ready, and yes, that does mean blood. We're too weak the way we are, sitting on our piles of gold, pretending nothing exists beyond our walls. We're too far gone for anything else. It just seems so good. And again, I've heard a few good things about this series, not many. I haven't heard many people talk about this, but the things I have heard are all positive. So, you know, I just wanted to like complete the set. So I did. I definitely don't have room for all of them, so like I'm just going to display the first one. But yeah, I definitely do like having a nice completed fantasy series to get to, because it means that I can just binge it and I don't have to wait for the next installment. I'm pretty sure this is a completed trilogy. I don't think it's a tetralogy. I'm pretty sure it's just 3 books. Okay, are we ready? Deep breath. It's not fantasy, but it is Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. I don't think my camera can even pick up how like luminous this book is. It's so Dayglow orange. It's not the kind of spine you normally see on my shelves, let's be real. So I'll be honest, I do not know the plot of this novel. I've heard several people rave about this book and talk about how good it is, so I just kind of want to go into it blind. I feel like especially with a book that's this short, but I have heard a lot of good things about Blake Crouch, especially this book and also Recursion, which I think I might pick up at some point. It's one where it's not normally my sort of like go-to book, my go-to genre. Obviously we all know I am like that fantasy loving bitch, but yeah, I don't know really what I can say about this. I really don't know anything about this. The cover gives me good vibes, and I think I'm really going to enjoy it. I hope I'm really going to enjoy it, or at least it's going to make me think, as long as I'm not bored. That's all I can ask for. Okay, shelves full, book haul definitely not over. So the next 3 books in my haul is another complete series, but it's not fantasy again. Look, it's a new year, it's a new me. It's not all fantasy, even though it normally is. But I picked up the Arc of a Scythe trilogy by Neil Shusterman. So that's book 1 Scythe, book 2 Thunderhead, and book 3 The Toll. So I have heard pretty good things about this series. I feel like I don't really need to say that. Like if I'd heard only shitty things about a series, I wouldn't pick it up. This is a YA dystopian trilogy, and I believe this is set in a world where human beings have advanced to the point where we have essentially conquered death. People do not die of natural causes. They are, for all intents and purposes, immortal. So I think in order to control the population, there is like a unit or group of people called scythes, and it is the job of a scythe to go around and essentially hand out mortality, as in they will, I think, kill and take the lives of people whose time it is to die, at least according to the scythe. Essentially they are acting as like the Grim Reapers of their world. So I have high hopes for this series. I figure it's not going to be like groundbreaking, but I have heard a lot of people rate this as like one of their highest rated like YA series of the last decade, so I am anticipating at least a good story. I've mainly been drawn in by the hype and the amount of praise that other people have given to this book series. I'm just kind of intrigued to see like, I guess, what the hype is about, and so at some point in the future I guess I'll be reading these. Okay, I'm just gonna start from over here again. Okay, time for another unexpected genre book. It is a thriller. It is Lock Every Door by Riley Sager. This is not showing up like just how neon like this book is. I feel like having this and Dark Matter next to each other in the same shot is just like, it's too much colour. So I don't normally buy many thrillers. It's not really a genre that I tend to enjoy. It's more like my mum's genre. But kind of like The Luminous Dead, I just feel myself intrigued as to what the hype is about. Like, so many people have said that this book was so interesting, so fun, entertaining, and I guess I'm just curious as to see like why? So yeah, curiosity got the better of me, and so I picked up a copy. To my knowledge, this follows a young girl who I think is like kind of down on her luck, like she doesn't have the best financial situation, and one day she finds an advert for a house sitter that has some like very strict conditions. I think it's things like you have to follow a very strict set of rules, like you can't have people over or you can't leave the house, the apartment, but it comes with a really huge paycheck. So she agrees to it, and I guess it's going to have some pretty interesting consequences. So I think this will be a book that I pick up spur of the moment when I'm feeling like just a, I guess like a palette cleanser from fantasy. I feel like it's good to have a few books around to sort of like refresh you before you dive into like the next big fantasy series, so I'm hoping that this book can do that for me. And I don't know, maybe I'll end up finding myself reading it all in one sitting because I'm just so captivated. Like, honestly, that would be a nice surprise. Okay, the next one is fantasy, and it is also a complete series, and that is the Godblind trilogy by Anna Stevens. So book 1, Godblind, book 2, Dark Soul, which again is my twin, and also has blue sprayed edges, which came as a total shock, but I'll take it. And then book 3, Bloodchild. So this is a series that I see all the time in my local Waterstones. Like, the cover, honestly, just keeps grabbing my attention. It has something that looks like a bloody corvid on it. We all know how I feel. So I'm not sure whether this is like a dark YA, like grimdark fantasy, or whether it's actually an adult fantasy. I'm not sure, but I'm prepared for either. I do not really know much about the plot other than it has something to do with like old fallen gods or something like that, which, if you know me, I love anything to do with gods and theology in like fantasy worlds. It's like a big selling point for me. I love plots that are to do with like fictional religions. So I kept being drawn to the covers, and I just decided that I couldn't stop thinking about Godblind. I don't know why. I don't really know anything about it, but it just kept popping into my head, so I figured I'm just going to buy it, I'm just going to buy the series and see how I go. I've only ever seen one review of it, and it was not a very good review, but I don't remember what it said exactly, which isn't very promising. But I feel like, just looking at it, I feel like it will be very much towards my own taste, so I am perfectly willing to give it a go, and I think I will really like it. Like, I wouldn't buy all 3 books if I didn't think I would really like it. The only reason that I ever put it off to now, I did initially want to buy this book like last year. I think I've mentioned this before, but like I went on Amazon. What I tend to do is that I go on Amazon because they tend to have a preview of like the opening or like the first chapter, so it gives me an idea of, first of all, what sort of like tense and person it's written in, and whether like the writing style is something that I enjoy. And I was like skimming through a few pages, being like, you know, trying to get a good idea of like what sort of story I might be in for. And Amazon, for some reason, their like book preview is the last fucking page of the epilogue of this book. So like I literally knew how the whole book ended. Amazon basically spoiled me by saying, hey, would you like a preview of this book? But the preview of this book is the end of this book. So I was so salty that this book was ruined for me. I still know how it ends. Like I thought maybe I would forget, but I guess the salt is real and well and alive in me, because I do not forget a slight easily. So unfortunately I do know how this ends, which is unfortunate. I hope it doesn't hamper my enjoyment of it too much. I still really wanted to give it a go because it's not the book's fault, it's Amazon's fucking fault. Like, why would you put the last lines of the book, the very end, the spoilery end, as like the freaking prequel? Like, why would you ruin it for me? I really hate Amazon, I really do. But yeah, something about this, it keeps drawing my attention. Like, the red gods are rising, like, I just want to know. I just want to know. It just looks deliciously dark. Like, I get a similar vibe looking at this as I did looking at Wicked Saints. We all know that Wicked Saints was a piece of shit that disappointed me, but I feel like this is going to be so much more adult and gory and bloody and like not like Wicked Saints at all. So like, I'm just really looking forward to getting to this one. I think I might try and prioritize this one at some point, because just look at it, like, she's gorgeous. Even stood behind me, I feel like the book cover is upstaging me. It's so pretty. Okay, time for another book cover that is also really pretty, and again, it's not a fantasy, but it is one that I really need to read. And that is Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. This is Brandon Sanderson's YA sci-fi story, which he's obviously known for writing like adult high fantasy, but I have heard so many good things about this series. I've had so many people say that like they read this book in a day, even though it's not exactly a small book, just because of like how much they loved it, and so many people put this on like their favourite books of like the year that it came out. And the sequel just happened to come out very recently, which, yes, of course, I did pick up the sequel. which is called Starsight, and like together these have like such beautiful covers. I don't know anything about book 2, but I believe like the basic plot of book 1 is that there is a girl called Spencer, and in this book humanity is like living somewhere out in space and they are kind of on like the brink of extinction, I think. There is an alien force that is constantly attacking like the remnants of humanity, and so the last thing that stands between humanity and destruction are these pilots that fight to defend and fight off the alien spaceships, I guess. And Spencer wants more than anything to be a pilot. However, it's going to be very difficult for her because her father was a pilot, but he fled from a battle and was branded a coward and a traitor, and so Spencer is kind of suffering from her father's like reputation. But I think like she's determined to like fulfill her dreams of being a pilot, and I think that's where the story starts. It sounds good. I really do like these covers. They are like, they have that sort of Brandon Sanderson like fantasy kind of vibe, but like the sci-fi imagery is just so pretty. It looks very like classic sci-fi as well. Like, is it just me? I don't know. I really like these covers. I will say, like, tiny little story time, I had so much trouble getting this fucking edition of this book. I bought book 1 and 2 together, and book 1 never arrived. Book 2 did, but weirdly book 1 just didn't show up. I know this edition is out of print now, so it's like slowly going up in price, especially with the release of the second book. So I bought this again from a different seller, and that one didn't turn up. They couldn't replace it, but they did have another one in stock. Same book, same condition, somehow more expensive. Bought that one, never showed up. I ended up going to Anderida Books, who stock, like, this has got to be signed, right? Yes, it is. This is in fact signed by Brandon Sanderson himself, and I have copy number 65 out of 150, so this is like a signed, dated, lined first edition, hence like the mylar. And yeah, I did not pay a cheap price for this book, but I had bought like every other freaking copy available that wasn't like £100, and none of them were getting to me, and I'm like 99% sure that all of these book companies had them for sale at like a reasonable price, like under £20, like the standard hard book price, and then realised after I'd purchased it that everyone else had put their prices way up because it's like out of print, out of stock, and I think they just never sent the books in the first place. Like, it doesn't go missing 3 freaking times, twice from the same seller. It does not. It does not happen. So I went ahead and bought a special edition from a bookseller that I trust very much to get books to me without like losing them in the post. Very like, I buy so many books, and books don't really go missing, but 3 copies of the same book, really? And continuing on with Brandon Sanderson, I went ahead and bought all that is published to date of the Stormlight Archive in hardback. These books are so heavy. So that includes The Way of Kings, Words of Radiance, and Oathbringer. And I will not be holding all of those up at once, thank you. So these are the books in Brandon Sanderson's The Stormlight Archive, which is part of his greater Cosmere series. I think all of his fantasy books are all part of his Cosmere series. So each like individual series within like the overarching world can be read, I think, in pretty much any order. I, however, have elected to go with like publication order. I'll explain it in another video, but all you need to know is that the Stormlight Archive is going to be the last series I get to, at least the last series he's published to date. So I will have read like Mistborn and Elantris and just everything else he's written before I ever get to The Way of Kings. It's just the order that I decided to read them in. However, this is the series that I am most looking forward to reading by him, so I feel like on the one hand it's kind of bad that I'm going to have to wait, and I'm sure that all of his writing is fantastic. Like, I'm pretty hyped for all of his books, but this is the one I'm most excited for, so like it's kind of bad that I'm gonna have to like put that aside and wait. However, I feel like perhaps it will motivate me to start and like slowly work my way through like his entire backlog of publications so that I can finally get to this, because something about this just screams that I'm gonna love it. Like, I look at it and I've heard so many good things about it. I don't know the plot of this. I don't want to know the plot of this. I don't want to know anything about these books. I literally just leave me, just let me go in completely blind. Like, I'm really excited to read these, and I wasn't going to buy them yet, but these are normally like $50 on Amazon. Like, why are American books so expensive? Like, you guys have all the trees. Like, why is paper so expensive to you guys? Books in Britain are so much cheaper. Like, it weirds me out. But I managed to find these on sale each for like less than $20. So, call me crazy, I am going to buy new versions of all of these once I've read them, just because I bought these, they came over from America, the box was destroyed, and some of them are in kind of bad condition. Like, some of the covers are like bent, some of the pages inside, the ones that had artwork on, are like creased and a bit squished. So I figured I would buy them again and just read these ones and allow them to get beat up, maybe annotate them because like they're already kind of in bad condition. I will at some point get nicer, newer editions of these books. Oh my god, the map and everything, they're so gorgeous. Like, they have like imprints on them. I don't know if you can see, but there's like a sword. It's just, I love these editions. I love, like, I've seen some of like the artwork in them on like the preview, but like, they're so gorgeous. I just wish I could find them from a seller that would package them knowing that they're going to be shipped overseas. Like, don't just throw 3 giant bricks in a box and expect them to get to me unscathed. It's just common sense. Okay, we're basically almost at the end of my haul here, but what is a haul if I don't include some Dragon Age? So I went ahead and bought the second of the Dragon Age bind-ups of like the comic series that have come out. So this one I think is Mage Killer, and yeah, Mage Killer and Knight Errant, the complete series, are like together in this one big bind-up volume. And if my camera would cooperate, you can see like some of the artwork on the front there. Basically, Dragon Age is like my favourite thing ever. It's just like my favourite story, it's just my favourite thing ever. I love Dragon Age so much. I am such a big fan of the video games that I like to also read the books and also read the comics. So the comics sort of like, they're like supplementary to the games, so they take place, some I think are like at the same time, some are prequels, some are like between the games, kind of the same way that the books are. Honestly, there's not really much more to say. If you're not like a huge fan of Dragon Age, then like I don't know what else to tell you. It's a fantastic fantasy world. It's basically one of my favourite things of all time. I love it so much, but I'm just like, I'm just such a fangirl, honestly. So yeah, picked this one up on sale and do not regret it. And the last book, the very last book in my book haul, is This Is How You Lose the Time War, and it is by Amael El Matar and Max Gladstone. I have heard a lot of people really rave about this, and it is so short that I figure I can't really lose anything by just reading it. I think this is said to follow, essentially humanity is split into like 2 timelines. On one timeline, I think society is all technological, and I think on another one they're like plant-based or something. And basically there are these 2 like secret agents who are both trying to go back in time and ensure that their timeline is the one that the current path follows. So their future is the one that ends up being, if that makes sense. And I think the 2 women, the 2 like secret agents, are like leaving notes for each other and messages and whatnot. So I'm interested to give this one a go. I'm interested to see what sort of like journey it takes me on, especially because it's so short. I feel like there's not a lot of room for story in here. However, I feel like a lot of sci-fi is kind of like that. It is like quite like to the point of the punch. So I'm really hoping that this will be like just a nice, fun, engaging read. And I admit I did mainly immediately pick this up because Kat from Catatastic really raved about this book. So I don't know, just considering the good things I heard, I figured like, why not? I'm just gonna give it a go. Even though it's not fantasy, it's not my normal genre, honestly I've not really got much of a reason not to read it. I'm just really interested to see like what the fuss is about. Okay, yeah, there we go. I'm just looking at the viewfinder because, man, that's a lot of books. I mean, half of them are to one side of me, half of them are to the other side of me. Barely any of them are actually on the shelves. Like, I have too many books. I know I say that every time. I say it every time. And yet, I still buy books. I can't not buy books. I do have another haul planned soon, but I am really trying to cut back. I am trying not to do so many book hauls. I am definitely starting to be a bit of a book hoarder, a bit of a book collector. I know a lot of people do want to like declutter and not own so many books on like their physical TBR, but I just really like the feeling of having so much choice, like so many opportunities to like read something new that are just like right there at my fingertips, that I don't have to worry about like going out and buying a book or waiting for a delivery of a book when I eventually want to read it. Like, I can just pick it up and read it straight away if I want to. I am one of those people who dreams about one day having like my own little library, like my own little room just full of books and bookshelves. So that was all from me for today. Thank God this book haul is over. Yes, I know it was a bit of a different book haul. I promise I'm still me. Even though so much of this was not fantasy, I promise I am still myself. Fantasy will always be like my #1 love, my #1 genre. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Maybe you saw like a new book that you'd be interested in. At the risk of sounding absolutely ridiculous. Which one of these books do you guys think I should try and get to first? Is one of these like one of your absolute favourites? Like, is there anything here that I should really be prioritising? So aside from that, I am gonna have to go figure out what the hell I'm gonna do with my shelves and maybe spend some of today reading. So hopefully I will see you guys in one of my next videos, but until then, peace out, mages.